He met her in a library where words went to sleep. Dust motes danced in the slanted afternoon light, each one a tiny, forgotten story. He was reaching for a worn copy of Rilke when his hand brushed against hers. A tremor, not of electricity, but of recognition, as if he'd found a misplaced part of his own soul. Her eyes weren't just a color. They were a place, a landscape he'd always longed to visit but could never find on a map. In that first silent moment, he didn't see a woman. He saw an answer, a key. The world outside the library faded to a gray hum. His own life, with its dull routines and quiet anxieties, became a room he could finally lock from the outside. He built a cathedral for her in his mind, its architecture spun from daydreams and half-remembered myths. He placed her on an empty throne at its center, draping her in virtues she never claimed and a wisdom she never spoke. Her silences weren't empty. They were profound pools of understanding. Her simple tastes weren't simple. They were an elegant rejection of a vulgar world. He became the high priest of her cult, polishing the image of her in his mind until it shone with a divine light, a perfect, flawless mirror, reflecting not her, but the man he desperately wished he could be. He would spend hours imagining conversations, scripting her perfect replies, her voice a melody composed by his own longing. And have you ever met someone who felt like a memory? A song you knew before you were born? He was in love, not with the woman who worked part-time and sometimes forgot her keys, but with the grand, silent monarch of his inner world. He adorned her with his own unlived poetry, his courage, his hidden kindness. She was the vessel for all the gold he was too afraid to mine from himself. Then, one evening, under the jaundiced glow of a street lamp, the marionette cut its strings. They were talking about something trivial, the rising price of coffee, a show she was watching, and she said something simple, something so jarringly her, a plain, unadorned opinion that didn't fit the lyrical script he had written. It was a single, off-key note in his grand symphony. He watched her speak, and for the first time, he truly saw her. The faint lines of fatigue around her eyes, the way she nervously fiddled with a loose thread on her coat. She was not a queen on a throne. She was a person on a sidewalk. The cathedral in his mind shuddered. A hairline fracture appeared across the perfect mirror he had been polishing, then another and another, until the image of his goddess shattered into 1,000 pieces, and all that was left was the reflection of his own shocked, bewildered face, staring back from the shards. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, a cold, hollow ache. She had failed to be the masterpiece he had created. He realized, with a terror that felt like falling, that the throne had always been empty. He had only been in love with a ghost, wearing her skin. In myth, it was a goddess descending to earth. In you, it is the beautiful, dangerous ghost called the Anima projection. It's the act of casting the soul's ideal image of the divine feminine onto a mortal woman, expecting her to carry the weight of your dreams, your potential, and your salvation. It is an illusion that feels more real than reality, and its collapse is a sacred kind of heartbreak. He never saw her again, but sometimes, in the quiet moments, he can still feel the cold draft from that empty throne in his soul. He built a heaven for another, only to discover he was its sole, lonely god. The flaws he hunted in her were the secrets he buried in himself. He once saw her as a flawless statue, carved from moonlight and myth. Now, his eyes are magnets for her imperfections. The illusion of the goddess shattered not into nothingness, but into 1,000 tiny, sharp-edged realities, and he, the spurned worshipper, has become an obsessive collector of the shards. It begins subtly, a word she mispronounces, a flicker of impatience in a crowded store, a moment of vanity as she checks her reflection in a shop window. In the grand cathedral of his love, these were invisible dust motes. Now they are grotesque gargoyles staring down at him. Each one is a clue, a piece of evidence to prove that the betrayal was her fault, that the divinity was a lie she told, not a fantasy he spun. He tells himself he is a detective of the truth, but truth is not what he seeks. He seeks justification for his pain. His mind becomes a sterile laboratory. Each of her flaws is a specimen to be captured, cataloged, and pinned to a board. He keeps them like rare and terrifying insects, like delicate moths in a jar. There is the moth of her occasional selfishness, its wings dusty with excuses. There is the moth of her insecurity, which flutters frantically against the glass whenever she is challenged. He studies them under the cold light of his resentment. He learns their habits, their flight patterns, the intricate designs of their ugliness. This collection becomes his new religion. It comforts him. It tells him a simple story. She was the problem. The beautiful mask she wore simply slipped, revealing the monster beneath. He doesn't see that this meticulous curation of her faults is a desperate attempt to avoid the gaping hole in himself, the void left by a god of his own making. He prefers the clean, intellectual rage of the collector to the messy, confusing grief of the fool. Look at the list of things you can't stand in others. Are you sure you're not just reading from your own hidden diary? One night, sleep offers no escape. In a dream, he walks the silent halls of his collection. The jars glow with a faint, sickly light. He leans in to examine his prized specimen, a moth captured just that afternoon, born from a careless comment she'd made. He expects to see her face, twisted in its tiny imperfection, but the face that stares back from behind the glass, trapped and buzzing with impotent rage, is his own. A cold shock runs through him. He stumbles to the next jar, the one holding her vanity. His own smug, preening face looks out. He rushes from jar to jar, a panic rising in his chest, his own cruelty, his own arrogance, his own cowardice. They are all there, perfectly preserved, labeled with her name. The great collector had made a terrible mistake. He had spent all this time hunting in her garden, but every moth he had captured had flown out of the dark cellar of his own soul. He wasn't building a case against her. He was building a museum of his own disowned darkness. The monster behind the mask was him. The ancients called it a demon taking possession. Today, psychology names it shadow projection. It is the unconscious act of taking the parts of ourselves we despise, our rage, our envy, our weakness, and seeing them as the defining traits of another person. We make them the villain so that we may remain the blameless hero of our own tragic story. He wakes up, the dream clinging to him like a shroud. The laboratory in his mind is silent and empty, the jars shattered. All that remains is the sickening, undeniable truth. Every flaw he had so carefully collected was a love letter he had written to his own shame. He chased a perfect light, only to discover it was his prison. A man stands in an endless desert, dying of thirst, refusing to drink from a small, muddy well. He's waiting for the ocean. Why does the memory of a flood feel more nourishing than the reality of a single drop? The world has lost its color since she left. Food is tasteless, music is noise, and other people are gray, indistinct shapes. He is trapped not in the present moment of his solitude, but in the golden eternity of the moment he first met her. That initial intoxicating feeling of pure projection, of finding the goddess, has become a drug. And he is a desperate addict chasing a high that will never return. He tries to find it in others. He goes on dates, searching their eyes for that same divine spark, listening to their voices for an echo of the melody he composed in his own head. But each new person is a bitter disappointment, a flawed copy of a flawless original. They are real, and reality has become his enemy. His inner world is a vast, silent desert, and at its center stands a lighthouse. It is a brilliant, impossible structure of white marble and gold, miles from any sea. Its beam cuts through the perpetual twilight of his melancholy, a sweeping, hypnotic pulse of light. It promises a shore that does not exist, a safe harbor that is only a memory. The lighthouse is the ghost of his grand illusion. He has spent months, maybe years, walking toward it, his throat cracking with thirst, his feet sinking in the sand. Every time he sees a glimmer of water on the horizon, it is only a mirage. In his apartment, the clock on the wall has no hands. Time does not pass. It only accumulates, a drift of sand burying him slowly. Above the desert of his soul, a shimmering door hangs in the sky, a portal back to that first perfect moment. But it is always just out of reach, a cruel reminder of a heaven he was cast out of. What ghost are you still serving? What beautiful lie is keeping your life on hold, turning your world to sand? One day he can walk no further. He collapses onto a dune, the light of the tower sweeping over his face, warm and then cold, warm and then cold. He is ready to die there, a martyr to a perfect memory. But as he lies on his back, his perspective shifts. He sees the beam not as a guide, but as the sweep of a searchlight in a prison yard, keeping him confined. He sees the lighthouse not as a beacon, but as a cage made of pure, blinding light. It isn't calling him home. It's mesmerizing him, keeping him wandering in circles, forever distracted from the small, hidden springs of life that might actually exist in the desert. The beautiful siren's song wasn't coming from her, or even from the lighthouse. It was coming from inside of him. The memory he worshipped had become a tyrant, demanding his life as a sacrifice. In myth, it was the siren, luring sailors to their doom with a perfect song. In you, it's the seductive power of the negative anima. When the soul image is not integrated, it becomes a destructive force, an inner succubus that whispers of perfect bliss while it drains the life from your reality, keeping you an emotional adolescent, forever chasing a ghost. He looks away from the lighthouse, and the darkness is absolute. For the first time, he feels the cool night air on his skin. He can either turn back to the beautiful, deadly light, or he can try to find his way in the terrifying, unlit dark. The choice is everything. The monster he feared was only his own face in the fog. You look in the mirror one morning while brushing your teeth, and for a split second, you don't recognize the person staring back. The eyes are familiar, but the stranger behind them feels cold, calculating, and capable of anything. A flash of pure, animal fear runs down your spine before the familiar mask of you clicks back into place. That stranger is where this next journey begins. The man has turned away from the lighthouse. He has wandered the desert of his soul and realized the problem is not the absence of an oasis, but the seizure of the traveler. He has blamed the mirror, the moth, and the mirage. Now there is nowhere left to look but inward. He has arrived at the edge of a great chasm, a wound in the earth that plummets into unimaginable darkness. The air rising from it is cold and smells of wet stone and old secrets. The only way across is a single rope bridge, old and frayed, that disappears into a thick, swirling fog on the other side. He knows, with a certainty that bypasses thought, that everything he truly fears about himself resides within that fog. It is the repository of his cowardice, the archive of his petty cruelties, the birthplace of the envy he pretends he doesn't feel. It is the shadow. To cross that bridge is to willingly walk into the heart of his own monstrosity. His hands tremble as he grips the first rope. Each step is a judgment. The bridge sways violently with every gust of wind, and the wind whispers his own forgotten lies back to him. Shapes coalesce in the fog below. The disappointed face of his father, the tear-streaked face of a lover he betrayed, the sneering face of a rival he secretly wished would fail. He feels like a sculptor trying to give form to smoke, attempting to grasp the very things he has spent his life pretending do not exist. This is not a journey to a destination. It is a journey to a confrontation. He reaches the center of the bridge, the point of no return, and the fog ahead of him thickens, darkens, and takes a solid form. It is a creature, a hulking, misshapen beast, born of shadow and shame. Its form is fluid, embodying everything he is not, weak and yet terrifyingly strong, pathetic and yet filled with immense power. It is the sum of every impulse he has ever repressed. The man's fear turns to rage, the righteous fury of the good man confronting pure evil. This is it, the final battle. He will slay this beast, purify himself, and emerge heroic. On the other side, he raises his fists, but as the creature takes a final step out of the dense fog, he sees its face. It is not the face of a demon, it is his own. The beast is his perfect, horrifying twin. It stops before him, and it does not attack. It simply holds out a hand, not as a threat, but as an invitation. In that moment, the deepest truth reveals itself. You do not defeat your shadow. You do not kill it or banish it. You must turn and face it, recognize its face as your own, and integrate it. You must shake its hand. You must accept that the monster is not only you, but that its terrifying energy is the source of your vitality, your creativity, and your wholeness. You spend your life running from the monster in the closet. Have you ever considered that it's just trying to give you back the key you dropped? In folklore, it was the hero's descent into the underworld to confront the god of death. For you, it is the terrifying, necessary work of shadow integration. It is the conscious act of owning your darkness, your inferiorities, and your hidden potential. Without it, you are only half a person, forever at the mercy of a beast you refuse to name. He looks at the outstretched hand, then at his own. They are the same. Slowly he reaches out and takes it. The grip is firm, warm, and real. The monster does not vanish. It merges, flowing into him like a river of ink, and for the first time, he does not feel divided. He feels whole. Love was never lightning. It was gold in the cracks of the broken vase. We are taught to crave a love that feels like a lightning strike, a sudden, divine, all-consuming fire that remakes the world. But what if true love is not a fire at all? What if it's the quiet, patient, relentless work of tending to a garden in the dead of winter, believing in a spring you cannot yet see? The man who shook hands with his own shadow is different now. The world is no longer a stage for his grand dramas of idealization and damnation. It is just the world. The colors have returned, but they are muted, more real. He meets a woman, not in a dusty, romantic library, but in the sterile aisle of a supermarket. There is no tremor of cosmic recognition. There is only a clumsy moment where their carts collide. She smiles, and he notices a slight chip on her front tooth. Her laugh is a little too loud. The old architect within him, the builder of cathedrals, feels a familiar twinge of disappointment. She is not a goddess. She is not a mystery. She is a person. But the man who crossed the bridge does not turn away. In his mind, he sees their potential connection not as a flawless marble statue waiting to be unveiled, but as a beautiful ceramic vase that has been dropped and shattered into 100 pieces. The old him would have swept the shards into the dustbin, mourning the loss of perfection. The new him sees the pieces, their sharp edges, the complex puzzle of them, and thinks of kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy is that the breakage and repair are part of the object's history, not something to hide. The cracks become the most beautiful part. Near this image of the vase, he sees a familiar object, an elegant, empty birdcage, hanging over a vast, dark expanse of water. He knows, with bone-deep certainty, that he could retreat into that cage at any moment. The safety of fantasy, of solitude, of being the sole, unjudged king of his own mind, is always an option. But life, messy and unpredictable, is on the other shore. The test comes one evening. They are sharing a story, and she reveals a moment from her past, a moment of profound failure, of fear, a story that exposes a deep vein of her insecurity. The collector of moths in him stirs from its slumber. The old reflex screams, "Here is the flaw, the proof of her imperfection." Capture it, judge it, use it as a shield. But then he remembers the face of the monster on the bridge. He remembers its hand in his. He sees the fear in her eyes, and he does not feel revulsion. He feels recognition. He sees his own humanity reflected there. In that moment, he doesn't recoil. He leans closer. He doesn't offer a hollow platitude or a solution. He just listens. In his mind, he reaches up and gently unlatches the door of the birdcage. He doesn't make a grand show of setting the bird free. He just leaves the door open, making a quiet choice to remain on the shore, by the water, in the presence of the real. Will you choose the perfect, empty cage, or the messy, terrifying, beautiful work of mending what is broken? This is not a concept to be named with a psychological term. It is a state of being, an arrival. It is what happens when the shadow is embraced and the anima is no longer a projection, but an inner guide. It is the capacity for love that is not a frantic search for completion, but a steady, grounded partnership between two incomplete souls who are brave enough to celebrate the golden cracks that make them whole. He is not a worshiper at an altar anymore. He is not a scientist in a lab or a wanderer in the desert. He is a gardener. The work is slow and uncertain. Some days are filled with weeds and pests, but he holds a piece of the shattered vase in his hand, feeling its jagged edge, and for the first time in his life, he understands that the point is not to find something perfect. The point is to build something real. The lightning is gone, but in its place, there is a quiet, steady warmth.